Hi everyone, Prema here, registered counselor and trauma educator. I love exploring the intersection of psychology, the nervous system, and the messy, beautiful process of transformation. And today we're asking the question, what if the way you react to stress, patterns of anxiety, shutting down, numbing out, overthinking, avoidance, what if those patterns are not only about what is happening right now, but what if those patterns are being shaped by memories your body holds, even if your mind can't recall clearly or even have any idea what those memories are? Because these aren't just memories you can think back to. I'm talking about two specific kinds of body based memories: one, procedural memory, and two, emotional memory. So let's break this down because it's really important to understand how these two memories function in our daily life. Here's a simple example of procedural memory. You're driving home, you get home, and you realize you don't remember a single turn your car took. We all happens to us all the time. And that's because that's our brain on autopilot, helping us do something familiar without needing to give conscious attention to it. It's very efficient. But here's the catch. That same system doesn't just automate habits, it can also automate your trauma responses because they become habitual. So the way you go quiet in conflict or freeze up in a certain situation, that might not just be about now. It might be your nervous system repeating what it learned back then. Now, emotional memory is a little bit different. It's not about what you do, it's about how something feels or how something felt back then. And these memories are tied to emotional experiences, especially the ones in relationships, the ones with other people. You can think about how your body tightens when you hear a certain tone of voice, or how your stomach drops when someone looks at you the same way a parent or a difficult ex once did. And our emotional memories live in the nervous system, often without a clear story at all. And this gets really confusing for clients because you might not remember what happened, but your body does. And when emotional memories and procedural memories come together and team up, that's when we find ourselves reacting to events today from the pain of yesterday. So let me give a few examples. Let's say you grew up with a parent who was very unpredictable or critical, and now you're in a meeting and your boss gives you some neutral feedback, not exactly what you wanted, but fairly neutral. Yet your chest can tighten up, your mind can start to spin. You may start to feel really small, like you want to just fall through the floor. You're not just responding to your boss. You're responding to an emotional memory from childhood, very likely. And the way you tend to shrink or fawn or go blank, that's procedural memory kicking in. That's what you learned from the past. So even though you're physically present, your nervous system is responding to a pattern it recognizes from the past. And you might be walking through life that you're reacting to what's happening right now. We like to think that we're present, that we're here, but our bodies are actually responding to stored emotional charge or old survival habits. And this doesn't just happen in intense situations, it can show up in really tiny ways. You may notice you avoid eye conflict when someone you kind of look up to walks into the room, or you could feel this little jolt of anxiety if a friend doesn't text you back quickly. Or you might notice that you get really defensive if your partner uses a certain phrase or kind of a tone of voice. So each of these are really common everyday examples of how your system can be responding not to the present moment, but to memory. So, in other words, you're not just experiencing this moment, you're experiencing this moment through the lens, through these layers of every other moment that has a certain felt sense, some familiarity to it. And one of the biggest places, one of the most painful places this shows up is in our relationships, of course. In early life, our nervous system forms blueprints of how connections feel, whether something feels safe or unsafe, nourishing or unpredictable. And these emotional memories get woven into our bodies, not just our minds. And they end up shaping how we see others, how we see ourselves. So now we have these early imprints, and let's fast forward years later and imagine you're dating someone, 30, 40, 50 years after childhood, and they don't respond to your message for a few hours. And feel into it. What happens inside of you? Logically, they're probably just busy, they have something going on, but our body has a response. Maybe our chest tightens, or we start spiraling, or our minds flood with thoughts like, did I do something wrong? Are they pulling away? If that's happening, that's very likely an emotional memory surfacing from past abandonments or feelings of rejection. And then how you respond. Maybe you withdraw. Maybe you start sending a flood of text. Whatever it is, that's a procedural survival strategy you learned that is trying to keep you safe. So even when we think we're reacting to something in the present, we're often responding to an internalized memory of a parent, a teacher, a past relationship. It's not in our conscious awareness oftentimes, but it's very real. And it shows us just how much of what we call the present moment is actually these layers with the past. And we all do this. Now, if trauma is part of your story, and for many of us it is, this dynamic becomes even more complex. We have to look at this because trauma, of course, doesn't live in our thinking prefrontal cortex. It doesn't live in our thinking logical awareness. It lives in the body, in the nervous system, and it gets woven into procedural memory. That means that trauma responses become automatic, lightning fast, and they're really hard to interrupt. And these are sort of things we often beat ourselves up for. So one of these procedural ways is you might find yourself avoiding intimacy, or overworking, or going numb, or exploding with anger. There's so many procedural patterns. And no matter how much insight you gain, the pattern keeps replaying. That's not because you're failing, and it's because your nervous system learned to survive that way. And survival patterns are not easily reasoned with. Again, they're not in this part of our brain. So the big question becomes, what can we do? So even though survival patterns aren't in this part of our brain, the first step is awareness. We need to learn to notice when our body reactions feel bigger than the moment actually calls for. That's a huge clue that something deeper is at play. And so these moments are invitations, not to shame ourselves, not to beat ourselves up, but to get curious about what your nervous system may be trying to protect you from. What's actually going on? What's the trigger? What is it I'm feeling inside? And if you want a practical, supportive way to begin working with these patterns, uncovering them, I've created a free ebook called Transforming Triggers. It walks you through a step-by-step process, brings in elements from internal family systems and parts work and object relations theory, so you can uncover what's actually driving some of these protective strategies. You get to explore the parts of you that get activated and really connect with the deeper needs underneath. And you'll find it under the free resource section of my website. I'll also drop the link in the show notes below, so be sure to check that out. It's a great resource, and I had a really great time putting it together, trying to bring together all these different models to help people. And if you're ready for a deeper dive, if you want to work more intensively with the trauma and the conditioning that's underneath these patterns, I highly recommend working with a somatic therapist, joining me for a biodynamic breathwork and trauma release training, a retreat, or come join me at Path of Love. These experiences offer very powerful, safely held, embodied ways to go in and access and shift those long held trauma responses inside. So you can come home to your body, your truth, and your capacity to choose something new. This is how we start to interrupt old loops, not with willpower, not with beating ourselves up, not with our inner critic, but with curiosity, compassion, and nervous system support. So if this video resonated for you, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with someone who might be caught in these same patterns, because in truth, we're all navigating memory, meaning, and the present moment together. So thank you for listening. Wish you a beautiful rest of your day. Bye for now.